Say Creedmoor, the anaerobic barrels that you talked about
Yes.
half of either well water, tap water, whatever, and then half rainwater. But then you do put some sort of vegetation in that, don't you? Or is it just the water
No, it's
that
all
makes the
vegetation. It's
fertilizer?
roughly 50 to 60% of the contents of the black barrel. So it's 65 gallons. So I would estimate somewhere around 35 gallons is going to be all of the vegetation that you've collected from your own areas, from your own stewarded lands, and from your own gardens. And typically, if anything was sprayed on it, like a herbicide or insecticide, I will bypass that stream. But again, as Master Young Sang Cho said, all that stuff breaks down. I just choose to avoid anything that might have chemical toxins in it. There's less environmental stress to the microbes if they don't have to process that first. I hope that makes sense.
I have a question. What if we don't have 14 years for this to form?
Oh,
How can we
beautiful.
do it in a shorter period of time?
How does 9 months sound to you? Have you got that much time?
Yes.
Well, I mean, the reason I say that is because when I first built this main garden here 14 years ago, all we did was put wood chips on the ground. And I'm going to go. I want to go on record here as stating that I completely misunderstood the method. Paul and Carol Gauchi are actually we're quite close friends right now, and I've had a significant amount of time to chat with him about what went right, wrong, and indifferent in my own journey. And I had no idea. All I knew was I got to get wood chip covering over the top of my red clay. I put 16 inches down, I put 12 inches down, and it was reduced by half after 4 months. Okay. I still had no idea what I was doing. I put seeds in the clay, they came up and they died. They turned their little heads down. They said, hey, whatever's down there is not working for us. It's funny how the seed shows you what's wrong. And then by the end of the year, I realized, you know what? We had a couple of plants that still lived at the bottom of the garden, a couple of zucchini plants, but we're doing really, really well. But it turned out what happened was all of the humus solids that were up at the top of the garden washed down to the bottom of the garden. And I had this sort of natural deposit of rich soil, even after only 9 months. Okay, so 9 months, and I had these zucchini plants that went all the way into November. They never do that. My wife would tell you if she was here and she could remember back that far. But it was an amazing harvest because we went from basically cooking and killing every plant under the sun in that wasteland of a soil covering. It wasn't soil, folks. At that point, it was wood chips and it was a mess. We were still trying to invite the soil biology back. I had tilled it. Remember, I tilled it 2 years before that. It was a mess. It was terrible. But a light went off and I realized, hey, if the habitat is necessary, why don't I just create the habitat? I'll put down 10, 12 inches of wood chips to establish a level of habitat for the microbes. And then I'll say, we can just kind of revolve around the sun a few times and it'll improve. But in the meantime, what I did was I carved out these little pockets into the wood chips. And then I put the little bit of compost that I had made on hand in those little pockets. And I put my seeds and my plants in that. And voila, we had instant fertility. So the only reason I say it took me 9 months, you probably could do it a whole lot faster. Actually, based on my instructions, you could do it way faster. Because if you can get your hands on some good quality compost, to make that good quality compost into a biologically enhanced compost isn't difficult. It really isn't. There's numerous ways to do that. Hopefully, I'll get a chance to talk about how do we do that more often another time. But really, without any doubt in my mind, you can clearly put any type of carbon matter over the top of your earth to bank moisture, to create habitat, and then you can cut little pockets into that carbon matter and put perfectly good soil in there. If you have to, you can even go to the store and you can buy peat moss. So back in the day when I didn't have a whole lot of soil, I'll tell you exactly what I did. I made my sifted soils the same way I showed you over there with the garbage pail and the soil sifter. And I used half peat moss and half that soil. Today, I have so much compost, we just use the compost. But back in the day, again, I still relate to that day when we didn't have anything. We started with zilch, just like you're describing. I don't have 14 years to wait. And by the way, I'm with you on that. I don't have another 14 years to wait either. I really wish this was written in a book somewhere. But you don't have to wait that long. And the other part of it is the better the quality compost that you use. You can do a bean test, put a legume in it, let it see it grow. If it grows really good, points its head down to the ground, it's not good compost. Points its head to the sky and says, I want to grow further. That's great compost. Use that. That's what you want to activate in your game plan. So very, very easily, you get a good bit of soil covering with whatever wood chips or even living matter you have. Because on the other side of this, there's also living compost. But we won't get into that today. For all intents and purposes, all you need is a little batch of soil to put right where that root is for that plant, and you're going to be doing well.
Any other questions, guys? Stephanie in the back there?
Hi, Creedmoor.
Hi.
I have a question. You had mentioned putting local, like native, bringing in native soils to introduce native bacteria and stuff. So if I went to the forest and I picked up a couple bucketfuls of old pine needles and maybe rotting wood and added that to my compost, how would that fare?
Okay, well, don't get caught because they're going to say the last time we saw someone doing that, I think it was Creedmoor Fury. Well, let me tell you my take on this because I love that initiative. Period. Because so much of that soil, so much of that detritus, so much of what you'll get from the local horizon is going to be untouched and unadulterated. That you could conceivably be gaining access to microbes that haven't been in anyone's garden for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. There's this product out there called a ancient Alaskan forest hummus. And it just so happens to be a repository of forest hummus in a forest in Alaska where they collect it and then they sell it. It's really expensive. But one of the things that a lot of soil nerds like myself have discovered is that there's an enormous amount of living soil biology. There's an enormous amount of fungal cultures that we've never seen. And I mean, that's the thing, you just don't know until you start looking. So one of the beautiful things about going into your own forest, which is what I do, I can see fungi from here. Actually, I'm 30 feet from it. We get boletes that grow here. We get all kinds of things that grow here that shouldn't grow here but do. I am going to go and hunt and forage for those things because on the whole, you are not going to transfer a soil biology or a fungal species that absolutely refuses to colonize in a new place. At worst, you try to and it doesn't happen. At best, you try to and it doesn't happen now, but then when conditions change, all of a sudden you got saprophytic action and it's down there and it's chewing up everything in sight. It's breaking up your compost fast, it's making glue, it's food for nematodes, it's food for amoeba, it's food for all sorts of things. Your plants are loving it. Are you going to be guaranteed to go out and get a root fungi that way? I think you can if you can find the right grasslands, if you can find the right pastures. I would also pull the roots of some plants up, especially if there's a lot of them, and add that to your batch to bring back to your garden, to your compost pile, or to your compost teas. Definitely. Creedmoor endorsed without a doubt.
Yeah. Any other questions, guys?
All right.
Over here.
1 second.
Okay, so question, I've got a quarter of an acre, which seems like giant to me, but I've got a whole half of it I've left just natural. I let all the dandelions go, so the bees had it. But now I've got 4-foot weeds. They look like weeds. Somebody gave me a riding lawnmower. I just don't have the heart to do it. Secondly, I got one of these tree services just dumped. I had them dump, 2 truckloads of wood chips. So those are sitting there. My idea was I was just going to throw those over the weeds and just keep improving that soil until I figure out what I want to do with it. Is that what you do, or am I supposed to mow down the weeds?
If the weeds are mowed down, what will happen is anything that's not hardwoody will pretty much senesce and fail to return. Most of those weeds, they're bioaccumulating things, especially carbon, and they want to restore that earth to a more stable state. So, in cutting them down, what you end up doing is you end up putting more organic matter down that will then go on to become composted remains that will then go on. Because bear in mind, you've got this living mat of weeds and grasses, and there's an enormous amount of beneficial soil biology on them. And there's all kinds of other things in there, species of insects that we know we need, but we don't love to say we do. And if you did just cut it down and cover it with wood chips, all of that stuff would convey through as the soils form and the wood chips decompose into humic solids. It will convey forward. However, with the one small caveat that if there are hardwood or woody weeds, they have a tendency to not really be too stifled. It could take as deep as 24 to 36 inches for some hardwoody weeds to weaken. In those cases, I always recommend making sure that there's no seed heads that convey, because you could be essentially opening up a can of worms if you cover them up. You could be creating a larger weed bank if you don't clean the mess up. So, I mean, that's always on the counter argument side is, well, they're already weeds. Why don't I go ahead and get a bush hog and bush hog it all down and then have my youngins or grandkids rake that stuff to the side? In doing so, you might be removing some of the soil biology, but it's still there. It's in the roots. But now the seeds are gone. So the only stuff that's not going to really be true stressed out is going to be the rhizome type stuff. Bermuda grasses, they need a deep, deep cover to really put them away for good. So I'm not sure if that's the type of grass you have. If you have the devil's grass, you definitely want to go deep.
We got no grass here.
Oh, okay, that's great.
So
That's way easier
we
to
got
manage.
dry, cracked, hard pan clay here. And so when we go through and the weeds are growing, we're talking tumbleweeds and some other native stuff that's pretty heavy duty. So we brush hog it down. I've heard lots of people recommend you brush it down or brush hog it down, cover it with a lot of people say cardboard first, and then that really smothers the stuff underneath the cardboard when it's covered with 12 to 16 inches of wood mulch as well.
And that used to be really great advice before the whole world of chemical contamination came to consumer goods.
Okay.
Today's cardboard is not what it used to be, and it's the dangers of putting a product like cardboard that is very likely to be coated in anti-flame, smoke retardant, and anti-moisture retardants is very high. And those are the exact things that destroy the microbial relationships of plants at every single level that exists.
Wow.
Some of those things, they're plastic coatings. Some of those things are so effective at blocking biological processes that, well, all of our plants are bioaccumulators. So if the first thing that happens to hit the ground is PFAS, the first thing they accumulate inside them is PFAS.
Say that last part again. The first thing to accumulate and hit the ground.
First, if let's say, for instance, you bury a bunch of cardboard, much of the cardboard out there has either been machined on a process that utilizes PFAS, or it's been coated with a type of PFAS that prevents it from burning up in storage or transit, or it's been coated with a type of PFAS that prevents it from getting wet or saturated or soaked through, thereby which preventing the product inside the box from being damaged. So there's high value in these chemistries. Okay, and the chemical producers and the commercial producers of these shipping components would love nothing more than for you to bury them under your gardens.
So 12 to 16 inches is really of wood mulch.
Yeah, you really want to get into that range. You do. You want to get into that range. And I know it sounds crazy, but believe it or not, it's not. It's not. I always think in terms of go big as far as depth, but not necessarily width and height. If I have enough chips to put down 12 inches and build a 30-foot by 30-foot garden, I would rather do that than build a 60-foot by 60-foot garden with 6 inches of chips.
Okay.
You follow me?
Yeah.
The economies start to go south when you start to spread this stuff thinly. And even if you think of it from a biological standpoint, we've tested the biology in the upper third of this stuff, and we find essentially one specific type of worm and then not much else. Everything else wants to move its presence down to the lower horizons where there's more moisture, more shade, more protection from the influence of the sun, its intensity, compression forces. They all move away from, the danger zone. And, we want to kind of capitalize on that, So if you're only going 3 or 4 or 5 inches, really, like you said, all you're doing is making it easy for the weeds to grow. All you're doing is, you're giving the bacteria an opportunity to really get jazzed about it. And then people cry after that because it's really, it's hard to stomach what the garden, I feel for whomever just mentioned their garden looks like that. I really do. I have a lot of empathy for that. Yeah.
Does that answer your question, dear? Anyone
Go
with
deep or go home. That's a good little phrase for it, Greg. Go deep or go home.
I like that. So 12
And
to
also,
16
they should be
inches.
young chips. Let's be clear about this too, folks. Some species of trees extinguish weed growth and nefarious woody weed growth better than others. Some species of trees extinguish grasses better. Like I find for extinguishing tenacious grasses, cherry wood is really, really good at it. You know, so
Wait, is that associated with aromatic woods specifically?
it is possible that aromatics play a role in it because that cherry is an aromatic wood. Likewise is cedar and eucalyptus, and so to some great extent is walnut. And those are all essentially allelopathic trees that they want to seek dominance in their environment. They want to grow things that are only happy when they grow, walnut or cedar. We look at the base of our cedar trees and you really don't see a whole lot of anything else growing near them. You look at the base of our walnut trees, the only thing that's growing there is grass. I can grow alliums, I can grow onions at their feet, but
Okay,
you get
all right.
more limited.
We
So
have
these characteristics.
we have another question, but also along that same line, we do have shaggy bark junipers and stuff here that are similarly aromatic to cedar, and they
I love 'em.
actually we use the barks in pathways where we don't want weeds to grow. But we have another
Yes.
question. So go ahead.
Hi, I had actually two quick questions. Okay, I have two quick questions. You mentioned the 165 degrees in the compost was too hot. What do you think the ideal temperature is?
I would say the ideal temperature is in the 135 to 140 degree range. I like the temperature to be around 135 to 140 degrees because number one, it doesn't need to be scorching hot. Scorching hot usually leads to anaerobic conditions. Scorching hot usually leads to denaturing of it and the production of other things like alcohols and esters that you just don't want near your baby plants. And what I don't want anyone to lose sight of is the fact that when we're composting, we want to make our compost facilitate for the gentlest and softest form of life out there, and that's the seedlings. The key to getting quality plants is to start with quality seeds that have quality microbes on them. But in this day and age, we're just not able to get our hands on seeds that have the inoculum from their original existence, from their mothers. Okay, so since we're not able to do that, the composting system becomes our way to gain access to as close to a similar type of functional soil biology as possible. And it makes a huge, huge difference. You can hear about people and their anecdotal evidence about this the world over, but we know now through the electron microscopy that it's not anecdotal, it's real. It's real. The plants are actually farming the bacteria, and the bacteria is feeding them, and then the plants are ejecting the bacteria to do the process over and over again. And when they do this from the point at which they're a seed, quickly and accurately at the right time, they tend to grow into be big adult plants that fruit voraciously. So the quality of the water, the quality of the soil, and the quality of the seed work together in a synergistic way, along with other physical and non-physical characteristics of our environment, some of which Greg was really, really good at describing. Thank you for that. But yeah, without a doubt.
Perfect, thank you. The other question I have is, do you think the 12 inches worth of wood chips would get rid of bindweed?
No,
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 I can tell you
flat out,
no.
no. Okay, and you know what? I was going to mention this. I was like going to go there. Y'all got some other questions. Sorry, bindweed person. Okay, listen, that's not for the faint of heart. Okay, bindweed is a serious carbon producing, bioaccumulating, woody. When I mentioned woody sticks and woody weeds, that's really what I was referring to, which is bindweed or bindweed or scourge weed, whatever you want to call it. That has to be cycled out a little bit differently. And there's something else I'm going to tell you about it. Bindweed is really, really a strong pioneer. And it will pioneer by root, by rhizome, or by seed. So some of the strategy that we have to employ is to slow it down and stop it from seeding. I'm going to say something that's probably going to have some people's heads explode. One of the things that prevents plants from seeding is satiation. When a plant or a tree is really, really satisfied with its environment, the last thing it wants to do is reproduce. And sometimes what we have to do is kick it in the pants to get it to reproduce. This is especially true for trees and things like that. Well, bindweed is part way to shrub, part way to tree. So it responds the same way. What I have found to be uber successful in the custodianship and removal of bindweed is to first apply compost tea to strengthen it. And then the first time it starts to seed, remove the seeds. We apply another compost tea that's rich in fungal mass. It's rich in fungal conidia. It's rich in all sorts of diverse life. And what ends up happening is the bindweed starts to chill out. It takes a long time. We cover it. We deprive it of light. We deprive it of oxygen. We deprive it of whatever thing that it likes so that it will get weaker and weaker. And then one final blow. You'll notice I didn't say pull it out. I'm not going to tell you to pull it out, because you're going to pull it out, you're going to fractionalize the roots, and you're going to have a million new plants all over the place. So if you can't pull it and all its 8 feet of root out, then there's another way. Kill it with fungi.
So let me actually add on to that really quick. I'm experiencing a similar thing in my yard, and we have bindweed, and I've noticed it's more around the edges. Where I've dumped a heavy load of wood mulch, obviously for reasons of mitigation. The wood mulch smothers and covers, but it still gets in like 8 to 12 inches underneath at the level of the.
It has no natural predator. That's the next part of what I'm going to tell you is there's a natural predator.
Okay.
And it's a fungi. So again, I go back to that whole thing about balancing fungal mass with bacterial mass together. One of the fungi that can be applied is a fungi that goes down into the soil, seeks out the roots of the bindweed, and destroys them at the source. I can send you information. I can send you information on this particular species of fungi. I mean, I'm a big proponent of using what's called entomopathogenic fungi for. Now we're really going deep now. Sorry, folks. This is not 101 stuff anymore. So if you'll hear me, I'll give you a small spiel.
Are you guys good? You want to hear it? Yeah, we're good. Go.
I'll go. Okay. So, I mean, we may as well. Why not, right? I still got enough light to be seen. I am a big proponent of raising this fungi to bacteria ratio because things start to happen really well when these two mutualists work together. When they start to work together, sometimes we have bacteria strains that moderate the function of fungi. Sometimes we have bacteria strains that moderate the disease functions of fungi. And sometimes we have fungi that moderate disease in plants, cause disease in plants, and also cause disease in insects. So that particular class of fungi that cause disease in insects are called entomopathogenic fungi. If y'all can repeat that, you can write it down and then you can search them out. And two particular species of interest, the ones that I've done personal trials with, one of them is called Bovaria bassiana. And it is a class of fungi that infects the cuticle and the chitin layer of the insect. And then it forms spores. The spores grow from conidia. They grow through the cuticle and they ultimately senesce the insect. They don't only senesce the insect, but they also impact future genera.
Future what?
Future insects.
Okay. All right.
It's such a powerful mode of action. And the impact, let's just say the kill impact is so slow. Remember when I said that many organisms respond to stress by procreating? Well, most of these insects do the same thing. They respond to stress by procreating. You get a little bit of the vestiges of this enzymes from these fungi into their procreant strains, and it returns their children to a state that existed before these insects were driven to destroy your plants. Because most of these insects have been essentially cultured to kill your plants. It's not normal for them to behave this way. They're behaving this way because their environment has been reduced dramatically, and they don't have access to the same things. Parts of their environment that haven't been reduced, half of them are chemically toxin, or better than half of them have chemical toxins in them that alter their genetics. They alter the way they're expressing. They alter the amount of fluids they need. They alter the amount of food that they eat. They alter so many different things. Mankind hasn't even gotten to the point where we can grasp this because our brains are too small.
Yeah.
Sorry, passionate Creedmoor coming through. Okay. There's another fungi out there, another entomopathogenic fungi called Met-Hericium anisopliae. Sorry, that's a mouthful. We abbreviate it to Met, just Met. You can even find Met fungus just by searching MET. It's another one of those fungi that gets into the cuticle and it causes a slightly different disease, but the only difference in disease is the color of the infection. So a Met-Hericium is going to cause a green fungus to grow out of the cuticles and out of the tissues of the insect. And by the way, worms, armyworms, gosh, what are the other ones? There's so many of them out there. There's just a whole entire laundry list of worms that aren't good to go along with the worms that are good. An interesting note about these two particular fungi, they seem to target the bad guys more than they target the good guys. As is always the case, you know, your stewardship is only as good as you can maintain it. You can watch it. So I definitely suggest you exercise more than an ounce of caution if you decide to go in these directions. They do impact squash vine borer. They impact squash bugs. They impact cucumber beetles. They impact Colorado potato beetles. They're effective against pretty much all of those insects that are chewing at your plants. They are one of the reasons why I believe in fungi so strongly.
How about
Because I
squash
believe
plants?
squash plants and squash bugs.
Yeah.
Yeah, squash bugs and Bovaria bassiana, they are not friends at all. As a matter of fact, that's how we got rid of it. That was when I got invited to do the trials with the bassiana, was when I was just coming off of a season where I pulled out my last hair because we had about 10 million squash bugs just destroyed. They destroyed everything in their path. I was like, wow, this is crazy.
Yeah, they multiply quickly.
Yeah, I thought for sure. I was like, are we doing it right? Like, I think we might be doing something wrong.
Okay, so two different things. I got two different questions. Kevin here has some cordyceps, and he wanted to talk about that because that's on the same line. And he's go ahead,
Yeah.
Kevin.
Well, the
Yeah, we
cordyceps
love it.
Paris. There's a cordyceps for almost every insect family out there. Can you hear? Senescence is
Mhm.
the most famous,
Barely.
which is where senescence comes
Yeah,
from.
cordyceps is a fantastic example. He is presenting a all-star example
Say
of
that again
this
into
type
this
of
mic.
function.
And we're going to have him
Yeah.
say that again into this mic so he can.
Yeah, well,
be
this
heard.
this here is Cordyceps militaris. Cordyceps sinensis is the most famous in the family, which is kind of a byproduct and the scourge of the silk moth industry for years.
Mhm.
Destroyed the silk moths until they found out that the cordyceps is worth more than its weight in gold. In fact, it was the most expensive food in the world for quite some time. Famous in the Himalayas, there's a famous cordyceps that destroys some kind of I forget what the bug is in the soil that overwinters in the soil, and the farmers up there would watch their goats and whatnot get all freaky after running around eating these funguses. They would seek it out and get all freaky, and
wow.
became famous as an aphrodisiac in China, and has since moved into human cultivation, and isn't too hard to grow. It takes quite a bit of microscopy, but
Does it make humans freaky too?
yeah, they say it does. It
Magic
that's
ones
my
do.
wife over there.
All right. We'll have to try that sometime. Okay, we got another question in the back over here. Go.
So you're saying that cardboard, it really isn't a good thing to put in the garden. What do you think of multiple layers of newspaper?
I would say newspaper is good because they've moved away from the inks on the soy.
Yeah.
They've moved to a soy-based ink, and fungal materials break down soy-based inks really well. You can usually tell with the cardboard. Amazon has now moved to a very non-toxic. Even the tape on it is non-toxic now. So there are cardboards out there that are really good for use in your garden. There are cardboards that are not. Obviously, anything that's colorful is what you really want to shy away from. Anything that looks waxy, shiny, anything that's got nice printed material on it, bad. But the soy-based inks are kind of look like old tattoos, kind of, dull colors. Not too bad.
Got another
I
question.
could say one other thing on that notion, Greg. Because of the new legislation that's being put forth about some of these toxic chemicals, there's a new designation for cardboard. It's called organic. So there are going to be, over the course of the next few years, consumers are going to start to see cardboard boxes that are tagged as organic. And
Wow.
those boxes that are tagged as organic will be safe to put in your garden. If it's covered with PFAS or PFOS or any one of those chemistries, they won't be able to put the tag on it. Another thing is that we can test the cardboard that you have, so don't automatically assume that the cardboard is bad. The two simplest tests, one I prefer, which is to simply wet the cardboard. If the cardboard soaks all the way through, it doesn't have something on it to prevent it from soaking through. Okay, so that particular chemistry is not on. If you want to test for the anti-fire or the fire-resist chemistries, all you have to do is, well, light it on fire. If the flame is green, it shouldn't go in the garden. I remember a day when we could burn cardboard and it made a yellow flame, blue and yellow. Y'all remember those colors? They look like normal fires. Well, now that these chemistries are on them, these fluorine bonded to carbon chemistries, it changes the color of ignition. So all of these tests can be done. They're very simple to do. And in doing so, honestly, you're protecting yourself and you're protecting the next 7 generations. You really are, because there's no telling how long your garden will continue to produce for you or the people after it. And if we go into it with the concept of doing no harm, in the long run, it's going to be better. And now that the EPA has taken a stand on this, for those of you that don't know about North Carolina, we happen to be a hotbed of activity for the PFAS industry, because Creedmoor's chemical company that is tasked with repurposing these chemistries that come from all over the world, including the Netherlands. They come here hundreds and hundreds and thousands of pounds of this stuff. And then Creedmoor does their job to repurpose them, and they dump some of them in the river and kill the fish.
Oh my God.
So yeah, this is something that is I am on the front line of this battle. And it's another reason why I've devoted so much of my effort to microscopy, because I can tell when those influences are present because of the way the soil biology behaves. So maybe, just maybe, at some point we'll have another session where we can talk more about remediation. I would love to talk more about white rot fungus and
we are going to have more sessions. They're going to be online. We're going to be doing free Facebook streams and YouTube streams.
Yeah,
with
now's the time to put
Creedmoor's
the
all
teasers
into
out
this.
there.
You're invited
Yes.
too.
I will mention
Come
you
on,
real,
folks.
on that front real quick. Maybe if you want to email me later, there's a new factory that came online up in your neck of woods. It's doing MycoWorks. I'm drawing a blank. I think it's called MycoWorks. They're doing packaging for IKEA right now. All their IKEA is made from mycelium in their new packaging.
That's
it's
awesome.
a huge thing that's just came
Fungi
out.
furniture.
Yeah,
Fungal-based furniture. Why not?
Okay,
well,
They're
just the
making bulk
packaging
with it.
material.
we
Just
also have
fantastic.
another question before we get too crazy. I got one more question back here.
Can you tell
We
us
do
more
want to get
about,
crazy.
can
Sorry.
you tell us more about the squash bugs that you eradicated? Because we have a huge problem with those here, and I would love to learn how you got rid of yours.
Oh yeah, that was exactly what we ended up doing. I was asked to be part of a trials-based experiment on the use of the Bovaria bassiana fungus, entomopathogenic fungus. By the way, you can buy the stuff. You got to search for it. You got to be very, very careful about where you buy it. It does have an expiration date. The spores come in conidiform, so Kevin can probably explain that a little bit better if you're there and you're present. And they need to be protected by placed in cool storage, and need to be dry stored, because moisture in conidia equals growth. And there are some little tricks of the trade but again, Kevin is there. I really think he'd be an invaluable resource into priming of the conidia for application to be used to mitigate the squash bug. We did very, very well with it. I thought we were never going to be able to grow squash again, and we were within a year we were able to go back to growing squash. It took, I will tell you, to just give you an idea about the application rate. I was making one application every 7 days for the first 2 months. Then I was making one application every 2 weeks for the next 2 months. And then I backed off. So it was sort of scalar. And then I backed off to less applications. Then I had to go through the same exact trial program the following year, the second I saw the squash bugs start to emerge from the soils and come back again. So I can't tell you that it's something that's super fast, because it's not super fast. It takes time and diligence, and you really have to be considerate of the environmental conditions when you're making any type of mycological application, any type of fungi. We don't want to make these applications when it's really bright sun or 115 degrees. It's not going to be effective in those conditions. And I can tell you what doesn't come with the fungi is a very good instruction manual. It doesn't. So if at a later date, maybe we can offer some assistance through our knowledge and our networking, if that's something that I would definitely
Yes.
be willing to do. Without a doubt, I'd be willing to be a part of that, especially since my concept is, hey, I can pay this stuff forward. Y'all can learn it, and then you have an opportunity to pay it forward to the next person that needs it. It doesn't have to end at you. You can take it and you can share it as your own. And it doesn't take
Okay.
long to put these principles together. It really does.
One more question.
One more question, and then we're going to break out into the groups that we have here of people, and you guys can just discuss among each other. But one more question, and then we've got about 35 minutes until we're done here. Go ahead.
How do you spell that, the thing you use on the squash bugs?
Okay, that's a good one. I'm going to tell you how I spell it. I go right to Google and I say Bavaria. I believe it's Beauveria.
There's a
And
really
then
good
second-
podcast on this out there too. I listened to at one point.
Okay, is there a link? Can you forward this questioner a link?
I'll have to look it up later. I heard it a couple weeks ago while I was doing lab
Okay,
work.
so the questioner is in good hands because we do have what it takes
Yeah.
to help you out. The second word is Bassiana. It's Bassiana. I think I've even heard it referred to as Bassiani or those Italians, they make things up,
Yeah, it disrupts their sexual cycles. It was a pretty interesting podcast to listen to.
Yes.
They also spoke of a wasp that
Yes, the
they're working
wasp.
on that attacks
Predatory wasp.
squash vine borers, and I can't remember the name of that either. I'm not great with scientific names when I get out of the mushroom world.
And it's not even necessary to be. You know what I mean? If we understand the classes of insects and their function, or the classes of microbes and their function, it's much easier than remembering everybody's names. You know what I mean? Bacteria and fungi is to compost what we used to think fertilizer was to our plants. It's the other way around. You know what I mean? The bacteria and the fungi are actually feeding the plants.
But the takeaway after listening to this podcast is start your squash plants early in the greenhouse and let their life cycles run out quick, because once they get stressed by the heat here in Arizona, the stress is what's going to bring in the bugs. And then you want to get ahead of the problem, and when the squash bugs come in, give up. That was the takeaway.
And
they
it's
do
also
have
beneficial.
options in the works.
Use some trap crops. Use some trap crops. Definitely plant some trap crops. We became big proponent of trap crops when I first started realizing that it wasn't just the squash that everything was going after. Because really, it's not just squash bugs that go after squash. There's so many other insects, earwigs, you name it. If your plants aren't doing well, the little roly-polies will come up and chew them. You name it.
Yep.
Everything wants them, and especially if you use salt-based fertilizers, because everything on the planet wants salt in its diet. And the problem with using some of these salt-based fertilizers is that they displace sugar. When they displace sugar and carbohydrates, and salt is actually a desiccant, the plant needs more water, more hydration to stay as fluid as it used to be. If it's not fluid, it doesn't have anywhere to put sugars. If it can't concentrate sugars in its fluids, then it's going to be a target for pretty much any sap-sucking insect on the planet.
Boom.
Plants that are not sweet, that don't have high bricks, that don't have a minimum of 12 bricks. We can talk about this too another time. I can do demonstration on how we do sap analysis. But the truth is that when we measure plant sap that's below about 12 bricks, they're usually getting sucked on. They're usually weak, and they're not good looking. They're not healthy. They're not vigorous. They don't have that lush green color to them. You start to see these hallmarks of plants that don't get eaten and consumed. And inside their tissue is lots of sugar, and we can measure that sugar. So you can draw some correlations between the two, but they're effective tools. A Brix refractometer, I think, is like $14. It's like, why wouldn't you even want one in your toolkit? What's expensive is the garlic crusher.
What is it? What?
The garlic crusher. We use a garlic crusher to crush the leaves or the stems or the fruit. It squishes out a juice. We put the little bit of juice onto a little viewfinder, and then you hold the refractometer up to the light, and it tells you how much sugar is in concentration in the fluid from the plant. It tells you basically what the blood of the plant is made of.
So you guys can tell here. You guys can tell the Creedmoor's like way up here, right? Like he's above, most of us here, I think. But so what I'd like to do at this point is kind of break out Creedmoor. We'd like to actually have people meet here together, and
y'all gotta throw me out, okay?
I'm going to make sure that we actually have the link for this video that you guys have been here for. We're going to have links to any of the resources, maybe the name of that word he was talking about, and we'll put it all in a place. We've got your email. If you're on that sheet back there that you signed into, we'll have your email. We'll make sure we send out a link to all that stuff. So I want to connect you guys. And also, if you haven't followed me yet, Greg Eddolls on Facebook, please follow me because I post this stuff out for the local area. I'm always posting like crazy. So if you follow me, you'll get the new links for the new streams, the free ones on YouTube and Facebook. And you can start like jumping in and digging into this community with us. So let's give Creedmoor a big round of applause. You did a great job, buddy. I so am thankful for you. So with that,
I'm thankful for you.